Dankie. Hi there, everyone. We are just waiting for 11 to start officially. I hope you guys have tried that difficult question 4 of the final of 2019. There's many correct answers, but I will explain to you also how we marked it so that you can see if yours would, even if you got the right output, it doesn't mean you get full marks. So we'll have a look at where you could have lost marks. So if you just joined us, we are going to look at question 4 of the final of 2019. I'm not 100% sure if the Q&A is available yet, but when it becomes available, you guys must please tell me what you would like me to explain next. My plan is to do the final of 2018 as we've done this one, because I feel that that's the best way of practicing. So if you guys can maybe go and download the final of 2018. You need to practice it anyway. But if there's something else specifically that you would like me to re-explain, because we really finished with the syllabus, please post it in the Q&A and I will have a look at that and see how I can assist you.
Just on that note, the Q&A is available already.
Okay, great. So you guys that have joined us early, please will you tell me what it is that you guys want to do? What are we doing next? I'm very happy to do the final of 2018. I believe that to do well in practical past papers is what we have to practice, and the final of 2019 really did not cover everything we can be asked. So you have to do quite a few past papers before you cover everything. So we'll start at 11. And in the meanwhile, you guys can send some questions. And while I'm busy with the class, please post some questions on the Q&A. I can't see it all the time. I can only see it when I go out of my presentation. So once you, but our presenter will send me a message and she will tell me, or our host, sorry, I'm the presenter. Our host will tell me that there are some questions and we can deal with them. And you guys must please also tell your fellow students in other schools, send them the links and tell them to download the Teams app so that you are able to view these live events. It does not work in the browser. You have to have the app, but you don't need a username for the app. So I know some of you guys that are watching, they have a username. But you don't need a username to join. You just need the app installed either on a computer or a phone or a tablet. You will also be able to watch these videos later on YouTube if you just search for Africa Teen Gigs. There is a grade 12 IT playlist and we worked on it yesterday so that all the videos of the previous weeks are in there now. They were just under a different playlist yesterday. So they're all in the correct place and hopefully you'll have this one soon as well. I know we spoke about this before, but just so that you know, universities are business as usual. So you need to apply. You have to look at each university, what their requirements are. You will get provisionally accepted, and then only once you have your matric certificate, probably early in January, only then do you hand that in, and that is your final confirmation you'll get then on whether you are approved or not. Nothing is changing on your syllabus. You are still writing about everything, but fortunately we have done all the practical and it's your turn also to practice that theory. Remember the question 4 and 5 of theory needs practice. The rest needs studying, and you're studying all the work in grade 11 and 12, and you can go through your grade 10 textbook. There are things here and there that you also will have to include that's not repeated in grade 11 and 12. Like, for example, converting those binary numbers to decimal numbers and those kind of things. So just page through that textbook again and make sure that you have done everything. Okay, I'm going to start, and this is grade 12 IT. Welcome to STEM Lockdown Digital School. I'm Leilani Legrandsie, your presenter, and we have been working on the final of 2019. We got quite far yesterday. Today, I don't think the lesson is going to be very long, so I'm probably going to start with the final of 2018 because this was actually not a lot of code. It was just that it was a little complex, and actually grade 11 should be able to do this as well. So because it didn't deal with two-dimensional arrays, but it did help to know a little bit about two-dimensional arrays. So let's just start here. I'm going to show you Just have to make sure I have the right paper open here. This is the final of 2019. So our host will let us know, well, they will let me know if she can't see what I'm talking about. I know sometimes the screen stops sharing. So there was a combo box provided for you, and it had names of mazes. So the combo box items looked like this. It just said maze 1 with a space there. Now there was 3 text files provided for you that match that name, maze 1, but when you're building the string, I'll show you, you have to remember to add the .txt. And in that way, we have the name of the maze that we wanted to load. So first, the user is going to select this, so we're going to store the answer. I'm just going to scroll down. So here it says extract the name. That just means get the name from the combo box. And then display a suitable message if the file does not exist. So by the way, if we're reading from a text file, you always have to test if the file exists, even if the question is not asking you to do so. So make sure that you always include if file exists or your try except, whichever method you prefer, because it's extremely important for you to have that code even if it's not asked. So here we have read a line from the text file. We're going to do that in our loop and then save each line as the correct index. An array was given to you, array maze. And then each line represents, and then the number of the index. That's what you're displaying here in the first column. So if we have a look at this part here is the text file. But when I'm displaying it, it's actually in my array. But this is what the text file looked like. This is the index of my array. So 1 to 16. Also, remember those hidden questions. There's a #9 in between those two to make that neat column. So the person's selecting here from the combo box, and then they're clicking on display maze. Okay, and then there was another example, but if you got the first one right, the second one would work. There was really nothing funny about it. So let me go to my answer here. And by the way, if it says, I think I said this before, if it says add your code here, it means code below that. Don't code above it. When we're marking, we're looking for code below this. So the provided code was, there was a .clear, and then we had to get input from the user for the text file from the combo box. Now, study this line of code. We've used it before during this week. It's combobox.items. Remember items, if I show you, oh, you can't see it here, but you guys know if I go into my object inspector and I go to items, oh goodness, it would help if I'm not on the button. And this is what will be shown inside of my combo box that the user can select from, and that's called my items. But there are many items, so we always have to indicate which one, and we indicate that through an item index. And remember, the item index starts at 0. So there were many ways of getting input from the user. You could use your item index +1 and add that for the name to add that to maze and txt. This I just found was my easiest one to use. So there's my square brackets, and remember, you guys often forget to repeat that name of the combo box. These are grade 10 rules. Remember that we can't ever use a property on its own. It has to be attached to an object. So here it was the combo box. So this is, I just copied out a name there from the text file. This is what it should look like in the RAM. So this first part here, this is what I'm getting in SF name, well, from the combo box, but I have to add the .txt, the file extension, to form that whole name there. From now on, I can use SF name in where I usually use the name of the text file. I just use file exist. You are allowed to use try except. You are allowed to use an exit inside of an if statement. You just can't use it in loops. So exit in the if statement. This is actually what the final exams also look like. When we look at the memos, is testing if a file exists. We can say not true, or you could also place there equals to false. Then a message, a show message is good enough. You don't have to use a message dialog box. And then the exit. But very important is that you have this begin and end for your if statement. Without that, if you didn't have this begin and end, it would, if the file did not exist, or okay, so if let's say the file didn't exist, it would display the message, but it will always exit. If the file did exist, it won't display the message, but it will still exit without the begin and end. You have to group these two or bind them together inside of your if statement, these two lines. I also get no output for this whole question, and this one was a difficult one to blind code. Then we have assign file, and this is the name of my text file of the maze that they selected. And then we have reset the T file, initialize my counter, as we usually do. And then we have while not end of file. This part here, in this last year exam, when we marked it, there wasn't marks allocated for this part here, but sometimes there is. Now, let's just, before I talk about this line, have a look at what was given. So I'm scrolling up here. You can see there's a constant given as 16. And then my array maze had an index from 1 then to 16 of a string data type. So this was the maximum number of items for my array. So let's just go back here. This is why I wanted to show you that. That's where our row count comes from. Remember I said always first look at the given code. Then what I'm doing here is I'm testing that I count is still less than that constant counter. And if it is less, then I can continue to add values into my array. Let's say, so the reason I have this in here is, as they did in one exam one year, they made the text file longer, so it had more lines than there was space for in your array. And without this extra condition in your while loop, the program would crash all the time because it's trying to go over, in our case, 16. So that's why I always add this condition here in my while loop. Okay, so now we're incrementing my counter because I started at 0 and now I want to put, I'm reading the first line from my text file. Very important is to increment your counter before you read into your array. So now I'm at 1 and I'm reading T file and I'm reading that first line into array maze, and now it would be 1. I count would be 1 at the moment. And now I have values stored, the first line stored in array maze I count. There was no hashes to find or anything. You just had to read the whole line into the array. So, oh yes, I got a fright.
Sorry, man. There's a question in the Q&A for you. It's absolute Greek to me, so I can't assist.
Okay, no worries. I'm quickly going to go to the Q&A. Okay, wait, let me just see here. Could I use a case statement or if statement and hard code the file names? Yes, if you did it correctly, you could, Mr. G. I'm glad you joined us again. You could use your that if statement. Oh, wrong place. The thing is, it's quite long, so I prefer that you guys study this. Remember, this question you only have 38 minutes for if we stick to the time available to us, or was it 36? I can't remember now. If you have to do a long if statement here for 3 lines, testing the item index for 0, setting as file name, and then the maze name, else the next item index, else the next item index, you're wasting time. I can code all of this in 1 line of code. This code here is extremely useful for reading from, whether it is a combo box, radio group, or list box. So I would definitely suggest you study this code. Let's say they had 12 text files in there with the names of the months or something else you know, we had lots of text files in there. Then that if statement becomes 12 lines long, instead of having to be able to do it in just one line of code. So you would still get full marks though. If that's your question, if you used your if statement, you would still get full marks. But this is just one line of code for the same amount of marks that you are going to code 3-4 lines for. Okay, hope that answered your question. So in my output now, I have, I'm displaying my counter. Remember that first line I said was showing the index. So my counter is now corresponding with my index. And then I have my #9 there, and then I'm displaying that line from the text file. And that's really it. Very important is if you've done this, go and check yourself. Did you put that stupid close file? There are marks allocated for this. That's number one. I mean, our aim for these lessons is we want to do well at the end of the year. But it's also important when we are coding that we remove this text file from the RAM. If you would want to read from this file again while the program is running, you won't be able to unless you have the close file. So an assign file and a close file is almost like a begin and end. So where you use assign file, just close your file as well and code in between so that you don't forget it. You also can't write to this text file, not that this was required in this exam, but in others it was. You wouldn't be able to read or write to it again at a later point in the program without this close file. So when we're reading from the text file, remember that begin and end for your while loop. It will always have a begin and end. Sometimes it's a little bit more complex. These were really easy marks for you to score. So of this question that counted 30 marks, I'm going to go back to the question quickly. And this was 11 marks. So now you have, what is that? Now you have 19 marks left for your next more difficult question. But if you're struggling with a question in question 4, I suggest that you just do what you know is required. You could get a mark for just displaying something. I'm going to show you some things that you could add code to without the program running. As long as you are displaying in a rich edit, you could even get a mark for rich edit.lines.add and the round brackets. Put labels in there, put variables in there, and just try. Now, this one was actually quite fun to do. I enjoy these last questions to do them as a challenge. So you must also try and do as many as you can, because later on you can see it helps you just to learn how to solve these problems in various different ways. I'm going to show you one memo today, but there are actually several memos that would be correct. Okay. So these here, every line here represents a line from your maze, and the dashes represent open spaces. So it's a corridor. They talk about the longest corridor, and the dashes, consecutive dashes is a corridor. So where a hash is, that then is the end of a corridor. Your job is to find the longest corridor overall. That's what solve is find what is my longest. The second one is there are sometimes, like in maze, I'm going to just scroll up. We'll come to back to the question just now. There are sometimes, like for example, in maze 1, there is more than one row that has the longest corridor. So this one says the longest corridor has 7 spaces. So you would see there's 7 dashes there. And in row 4, where's that? There's 7 dashes there, consecutive dashes. And then 13 actually has 7 here and 7 here. So in order to tackle this question, if you are struggling with it, what I would do first is I would try to find out first, what is the longest corridor? So that's the 7. Try and just find that first. There's already marks for that, and that's actually not so difficult. That's number 1. Then number 2 is I will try now to see how would I accomplish this? How would I find corridors with the same number of spaces that are also the longest corridor? And then finally, if you ran this program, you would see that because it depends on how you problem solved it, but depending on what you used, your 13 might have appeared twice here at the bottom, then you would lose a mark. Okay, so just tackle these questions bit by bit. Okay, so this is the display from Display Maze button. We don't have to redisplay. Then it says determine the maximum number of consecutive rows, display the maximum number, that's that 7 that you saw at the top, at the bottom, and then display a list of rows that contain this maximum number, and that's these numbers at the bottom. Okay, so, and then hopefully you guys also tried Maze 3. This one was a little easier because there was only one row with 11 spaces, so we only displayed 15 here. Okay, so now I'm going to go to my memo. Now this is my way of solving it. Let's just first, before we look at how I solved it, because I think the way that I solved it could help you in future think a different way of seeing what is possible, because maybe you need similar code in this year's final. So, but let's just talk about yours and whether yours is correct or not. If you run your program and you get the correct output, so this is how we marked it. We ran the program, we saw correct output for both mazes. We stopped the program and then we went into your code. And I'm going to take you back again to this part here. Remember, this is the code that you were not allowed to use. So this is not first principle coding. So we may not use, if you used a high or low or max or min value on your arrays, you would lose marks because it's not first principles. So even with correct output, you wouldn't get full marks if you were using one of the ones that you see on the screen now. So that's where some learners lost marks. But basically, if you've used first principles, you would get full marks for getting the correct output. And make sure that that first maze does not display row 13 twice. That was also important. Okay, so remember in question 4, you're allowed to use, you can create procedures, extra procedures or functions. You can declare new arrays as you see fit. I've even had learners that decided it's a good place to add a class. And if it's working and it solved the problem, then that's great. So you are allowed to add extra structures to this program. You just can't change things that are given, like the text files or your form or provided code. Okay, so this is how I completed it. I decided to use, I actually have 2 solutions, but the other one is just way too complex. So this one is easier. This is an array that I've stored 1 to 16. This is the same as, remember, our row count had 16 spaces. So it would probably be better to have said I row count here, but we wouldn't have marked it that strictly here. So I have used 16 here. I'm just going to put it back to 16. It's easier for us to use numbers. And in here, I'm storing for each row its maximum number of its longest corridor. So the maximum number of consecutive dashes if it was higher than the previous highest value. Okay, hopefully that will make better sense as we go through this answer. Now, this is a one-dimensional array, but if you go and watch the videos we did on 2D arrays, where I had questions about calculate something overall or calculate something per row, you can actually see that those same rules can be applied here, because we kind of had a 2D array in a way, because the one loop was looping through my row. That's 4K. I'm going to come back to what I've done there just now. So 4k is 1 to I row count. That's looping through each row. Within each row, I'm looping through each maze here. So that's our string handling. So you'll see I have two indexes there. The one is holding the whole row, like for example, that's an example of what could be in there. And then the next one here is looping through each character. So it's kind of like a 2D array question if we're combining one-dimensional arrays with string handling questions. Okay, so to understand what I've done, Imax is holding the highest number for the longest corridor. In other words, overall of this maze, what is the number of the most consecutive dashes? What's the longest open space that I have? That is Imax. Now, if you think back about our 2D array questions, Imax I've set to 0 above the loop because it's an overall question. Okay, so that's what Imax is doing. Now, I had to initialize my array max here, all of them, else we get those random big numbers if nothing has been added to it. But I know that if without this, your code would have worked. And without this, we would have given you full marks. But I just wanted to add this because that's actually the appropriate way to have solved my question. Okay, so here's my for loop that runs through each item in my array. And I'm initializing iCount to 0. Now, iCount is holding the longest corridor in each row. So it is looking at one row at a time. Remember, we can find a long corridor and another long corridor. iCount is going to count how many consecutive dashes there are. Okay. So because this is per row, I've put the initialization here on the inside of this for loop. Because if you go back to our rules of 2D arrays, it's a per row question. So I've put my initialization here. Every row starts at 0. Maybe it just contains hashes and there's no dashes to be found. Then the answer would be 0 for that question. And then in here, I'm looping through each item of my array. And this is an example of the items of the arrays. The @ were indicating the end of corridors. So we could have started at 2 and -1, but we didn't mark that strictly. Same there for your for loop at the top row and the bottom row also consist of these @ symbols, and we didn't have to loop through them. So whether you did or didn't loop through them, it didn't matter. Okay, so now I'm tackling one row at a time. So in array maze, this is what one would find. So remember that is now this part here. And now I'm going to each character with this inner loop. I'm using J here. So I have for J is 1 to the length of this. And then I'm counting now if this dash, if this character I'm currently at is a dash, I increment my counter. Okay. Now within this, when it is a dash, I then also every time test iCount against Imax. So for the first loop and the first dash that is found, it will be bigger than, and we'll set it to 1. But further on in your program, you'll continue to compare the current number of consecutive dashes with my Imax, which is the overall longest corridor. If it is higher, I replace Imax with iCount, and I'm also storing Imax in this array max. This is my local variable that I declared, my local array. So if I'm in row 1 and row 1 had a count of 6 at this point, 6 will become Imax, and then Imax will be stored in array max 1. If I find a higher number for a longer corridor, it will just be replaced. But at the end here, before I loop to my for loop for the k loops again, array max k will hold the value for the longest corridor in that line. or in that row of my array. Now you'll see here I have an else I count is 0. This is important because if I hit a hash, that's the end of a corridor. It's no more an open corridor. We're looking for open spaces. So the moment I hit a hash, I want to reset for this line to continue in this example here, to continue counting there. I want to start at 0 again, and if it is the dash, I'll start counting 1, 2, 3, and so on. So the initialization here of your counter had to happen before I start looping, but also inside of this loop when I hit a hash. That's really what it's saying, is when you hit a hash, restart it. But I've just used it in the else of this if statement to say if it's not a dash, then go here, so that I'm including my at symbols as well. Now I'm going to quickly run my program with extra lines of code. Yeah, I'm just going to put this, I'm going to take out the actual answer. I'm going to display for you, I'm going to show you the code first, my row counter, and I must maybe just probably put some spaces in here so you guys can see properly. So let's just add a space there. I'm showing my index, okay. I'm showing array maze for you, which is that value there, a space, and then I'm going to show you what is stored in array max k. Now, I hope you guys can see the running of the program. I'm never sure if you can see it when we are using Teams. Okay, I hope you guys can see this. If not, someone needs to shout and say you can't see the output now of maze 3. I have the numbers here, that's my indexes. I have my values of my arrays, and now I have here array max. So you'll see here array max is 7 here. Okay, there it is 0 because there were no dashes, and uninitialized array max. But here it would be 7 because the longest corridor was 7. So in this row here, it stays on 0 because none of them were higher than Imax. Remember, at this point here, both Imax and that iCount will have a value of 7. So every other line will be compared now to 7. And I said greater or equal to because remember the question said to us we want to display if that value is also, so we have more than one row that can have the highest value. So that's why my condition there says if the counter is greater or equal to Imax. So here you can see I had a corridor with 7 open spaces, and I have Imax would be 7 and the counter would be equal to that 7, and that's why 7 was stored in array max. And so it continued. So 7 was the highest one here as well. I almost think that this was in both. I'm not going to sit and count that now, but doesn't matter. This was 7. And Imax at this point was still 7. But when it came here to line 15, there were 11 dashes. So at line 15, Imax was replaced with 11, and now 11 is stored in array max. So you're going to see my next code that I'm going to explain to you guys. I'm going to loop through this array max that you see on the side here. And I'm going to compare the array max value to Imax because Imax would also now be 11 in this scenario. So I'm going to loop through this, and if this value is equal to 11, then I will display my index. So this will only display index 15. I'm quickly going to show you the maze 1 as well. So here we have the first row had 7. So that's why there was 7. And then there was another row here with the row, another 7 here. Oh, there was another one here as well. I remember there was 3. So in this case, Imax was set to 7 right at the beginning, but we have 1, 2, 3 of these rows that have the longest corridor that's equal to Imax, which is 7. Okay, so I hope that output helped you a bit. This was obviously not needed. I just added it so that I could show you guys. It's really hard when we're not in front of each other in the classroom to show you guys these things. Okay, now important if there was an empty line below the output of your mazes. I spoke about hidden questions before. This is a hidden question. Below your output of your maze, before you display the words longest corridor, there was an empty line. So make sure that you add the empty line after that display. Then we have the longest corridor label. Don't leave out your labels because you're going to lose marks. And then we have into string imax. That was what you had to display, what the length was of the longest corridor, and mine is stored in imax. Now what I'm doing is I'm looping through this array max k, and I'm testing if the value stored in array max k is equal to this longest corridor. And if it is, you would see there was a #9 before the output. I am adding my #9 plus into string, and then I'm displaying that row number k. So that now when I run my program, I will get the example of input and output. I have my imax displaying there, and I have these indexes displaying down here. And I'm not displaying 13 twice because I'm storing that value for array 13 only once. And if we go to maze 3, I will see only the 115 there. Don't worry if I know the output in the exam, it showed this S here on the right. You didn't do anything wrong. Don't worry about that displaying in the next line if yours is doing the same. And then we can just test maze 2 as well. And this was also 8 spaces, also row 13. So let's have a look at what you could have done if you struggled with this program. We know we're looping. So we have this in this array. So this line here, you should have somehow known that we're going to loop through our array. So you could score those marks there for the for loop for looping from 1 to I row count. Now this one for loop, and this is different for every question paper, so I can't tell you always, but I can tell you that sometimes one for loop heading, where I'm at now, could count 2 marks. So one for having a for loop, the other for using the correct values here. So some learners might have used incorrect values and lost a mark there, but a for loop could even be worth 2 marks. Now we're finding the highest. So somehow you had to initialize a value because you know we're counting dashes. So have an inc of I count and initialize it. Hopefully you guys worked out that the initialization had to be on the inside of this loop. And then you also knew that we had to loop through each line. If I just quickly, I'm just going to use S new here. This was actually from my previous example. I just copied and pasted. But you can also do this if this, now I'm messing up. If this makes more sense to you, that's okay. So you could do it like this. And then now all you do is, oh goodness, you're going to put S new in there. And then we can put S new in there. So this makes maybe more sense to you. It's still doing the same thing, but you can assign your array there to a string, loop through 1 to the length of that string, and this is our normal string handling with a dash. So you know we're looking for dashes. So you should somehow have a if statement searching for a dash, and we're looking for the longest. So another if statement to test if something is greater than the other and setting a maximum value to a value. So those are basic things that you still could score marks for, even if you don't have a running program, and even if you have a program that is not working, not producing the correct output. And then This also, empty line, labeling, and displaying just some variable, that all could help you with with scoring marks. Displaying the counter, like within K, that could also score you marks. And sometimes with a rich edit, we'll give you marks for having that bit of the code with the round brackets. So that's 1 mark, and then second mark for displaying a value in it. So don't just stop coding. Go to where you see output and input, and you know we're using loops, and just try and use that as much as you can and hope for the best. These questions are difficult, I know, but with practice, you actually get much better. I'm not going to start today with the next question. What I want to show you guys is, I wonder now if I have it open here. So I have the, this is not good. Okay, you know what, I did download it. What I want you guys to do is I want you to go and have a look at I'm going to show you on the education.gov.za website where exactly to go to find these exam guidelines. So our guidelines for 2018 was set, and it is still applicable as up to now for this year. I don't know if we're going to, after lockdown, get new exam guidelines, but if we do, a lot of it will stay the same. So I need you guys to go and download it and then have a look for me at the practical part. So it's quite a lengthy document explaining your theory. And there's some practical bits here, just general things. That's not quite yet what I want you guys to look at. There's some OOP. Here is what you need to know for, I'm going to zoom out so it's a little bigger on your screen. Here's what we need to know for SQL. Select and distinct where, order by, group by, between, in, like, is, null, having. We've done all of this. Insert, update, and delete. For those who didn't see these, the videos are on YouTube for you to see. Aggregate functions, and then also subqueries. We did do a subquery in the SQL question. They say just stay in a simple form with a select or an aggregate function. So I have examples in my books with insert, update, and delete. But if I interpret this correctly, we're not going to be asked to do those. Just a simple select. Then all these date functions and the string functions. I see many learners are a bit confused as to what the PAT is asking for manipulation in SQL using string functions. This is what they are talking about. You need to use your string functions, and in SQL it's not called length, it's actually just called len, like that. But you are required to have a SQL statement using one or more of left, mid, right. They didn't mention len, but I'm sure your teacher will accept that as well, something that you could maybe just individually check with your teacher. And then dynamic input using user input, and we've done all of this, and also where we have calculated fields and reading from both tables. But now this is the part that I really want you guys to look at. So I've downloaded this morning. It's on page 9, and this is the algorithms. Now, very important is that they say examples of algorithms that learners must be able to recall. So that means that the algorithms might not be given to you. You have to write them yourselves. So it is important to go and create a program for yourself, to go and practice some of these examples. Swapping of the values, that we can do. We've done that when we're doing sorting. Remember, you start and end with a keeper and so on. Then that is also for those who haven't seen it in the 2-dimensional array sorting video. And then we had to calculate highest, lowest, average, mean. So you guys all know mean from maths since grade 7 or 6. So you can just create a program with an array, give it random values, and see if you can calculate the mean of those. I think highest, lowest, and average you guys are all fine with. And then we have basic calculations, which we've covered really, volume, area, VAT, discount. And then is a number odd, prime, or posit. We did prime. We're going to do prime tomorrow. So final of 2018 question 1 for tomorrow. Also start with question 2 because maybe question 1 doesn't take us that long. But there it did ask us for prime. So this document is not just here for fun and games. It's actually giving you some advice. So go and make sure, here's factors. So tomorrow's one is using both of these, prime and factor. Isolate digits in an integer number. Hopefully you guys can find one of those questions where you analyze figure out if an ID number has the correct check digit. That's that 13th character. Go and Google it, check digits of an ID number, South African ID number, and code it and see if it would work for your ID number. And then lowest common multiples, greatest common divisors, age based on your ID number, string handling, palindromes. So a palindrome is something that when you write it forward and backwards, it's spelled exactly the same. It could be numbers or it could be characters, but when it's characters or a sentence, you have to remove all spaces and special characters like commas and exclamation marks, and it doesn't matter whether it's capitals or lowercase. So that's also a good one to practice and something that you can very easily try yourself. Then apply basic input processing validation techniques. So testing if you're not dividing by 0. I'm sure you guys are good with validation at this point. And then this is important, convert decimal and binary numbers. Go back to your grade 10 theory textbook, take that textbook and see if you can write the code to do it. And make sure that you know how it works for both theory and practical, because that is part of your theory exam. Then you want to, this is arrays searching. So searching with a flag, and now we have other birds here today. With a flag, without a flag, making the loop stop, sorting arrays, and changing arrays. So this brings me, I'm going to show you guys quickly on my, I can't believe the birds are following me. It's sitting right next to me. So today we've covered now the final of 2019 question 4. And on this website here, education.gov.za, I've shown you guys before curriculum and national senior certificate. That is where you find the past papers. But for exam guidelines, you need to go to curriculum and then to national curriculum statements, grade R to 12. Then on the right of that website, there's a list, and you'll see if you click on 2020, there isn't any for IT. But if you then click on the 2019 guidelines, that is still applicable in 2020, you will find the IT guidelines for you that you can use. And also there's a site for you with some tips and tricks that you can use to find some information about how to tackle exams and so on. And then please do for tomorrow, I'll have a look at your Q&As if you want to pop a Q&A quickly before we end of things that you would like to know. Else I'm going to continue to go through the final of 2018, and we'll start at question 1 and work our way through up to question 4 again. So guys, thank you very much for watching grade 12 IT at STEM Lockdown Digital School. You will find these videos posted later today or in this week. The previous ones have been posted, but you can have a look at YouTube, Africa Teen Gigs. There is a playlist for grade 12 IT, and you'll find all my previous lessons from our first week. This is our 4th week. So thank you very much to my host, who's been great, and please follow African Teen Gigs on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and also check them out on YouTube. Guys, same time tomorrow, links will be different. Thank you for joining us. See you tomorrow. Bye.